Trump recently proposed a 10% tariff on all imports into the US, and even up to 60% on goods from China. Most people hear that and immediately think, here we go again, trade wars, higher prices, and of course America isolating itself from the world. And yeah, on the surface, this does sound like a step backward. Tariffs feel like something out of an old economics textbook, the kind of thing that leads to more expensive iPhones, angry trade partners, and less innovation. But here's the thing, what if Trump's strategy is smarter than it looks? What if this isn't just about punishing China, but about creating leverage, but also reshaping supply chains and winning over voters in a way that other politicians can't? So in this video, we're cutting through the outrage and the headlines and breaking down the pros and cons, as well as what this new tariff policy could mean for Trump, for the economy, and for you. So let's break this down. Alright, quick recap before we dive deeper. A tariff is basically a tax on imports. So if the US slaps a 10% tariff on, let's say, French wine or Chinese electronics, this means that American consumers or retailers have to pay 10% more to bring those products in. And as already mentioned, Trump's proposal is pretty bold, a flat 10% tariff on all imported goods and up to 60% on goods from China. And that's massive. For context, during his first presidency, Trump imposed tariffs mostly on steel, aluminum, and other Chinese products, and it triggered a full-blown trade war. This time, it's broader, bigger, and more aggressive. Think cars, computers, clothes, even everyday items could get hit. The logic is that, according to Trump, it's about protecting American industries, reducing reliance on China, and boosting domestic jobs. But critics say it's just going to make things more expensive, risk retaliation from other countries, and damage America in global trade. So the question here is this reckless, or what's the strategy behind it? Okay, let's talk about why some people, including serious economists, support Trump's tariff plans. And no, it's not just blind nationalism, there are real arguments here. Globalization moved a ton of US manufacturing overseas, especially to China. With lower labor costs abroad, companies just found it a lot cheaper to outsource everything from electronics to pharmaceuticals. But the downside is dependence, and in the case of the US, especially on China. Tariffs raise the cost on imported goods, which can make it more competitive again to produce them locally. For example, US steel production actually rose after tariffs in 2018. And during COVID, we saw how dangerous it was to rely on foreign suppliers, especially for essentials like masks, medicine, or microchips. So this isn't just about jobs, it's about resilience. A country that cannot make its own essentials is vulnerable. Tariffs in this case aren't about isolation, they're about strategic autonomy. Yes, one of the downsides is that it does make things more expensive for the consumer, and we'll cover that in a minute, but that is something Trump is willing to accept to make the American economy and production as a whole stronger again. That's the theory, at least. Because you don't want to need China for everything, especially in a world where geopolitics are getting a little shaky. Tariffs aren't always about protectionism. Sometimes they're just a negotiation tool. And it seems like this is one of those cases and probably the #1 reason why Trump came up with these plans. Just like you'd never show your full hand in poker, tariffs can pressure trade partners into better deals. Remember back in 2018 when Trump imposed tariffs on China, and within months, both sides were sitting at a table renegotiating trade terms. The result was the Phase 1 trade agreement, which included terms like China promising to buy more American goods. So while the media was busy screaming trade wars, Trump was actually using those tariffs to rebalance trade. The idea is simple. If a partner keeps undercutting your industries, make them feel the pain until they agree to fairer terms. It's not diplomacy in the usual sense, it's economic hardball, but like it or not, it has worked in some cases. So this one's less about economics and more about political strategy. Tariffs are simple. They're easy to explain. We are protecting American jobs. It just lands. Think about the voter in Michigan whose factory had to shut down because production moved overseas. A tariff sends a signal. We are bringing jobs back. We've got your back. And that's powerful messaging, especially in swing states where every vote matters. Whether or not tariffs actually bring those jobs back is debatable, and we'll get to that. But politically, it works. It gives Trump a narrative. They gave your jobs away, I'm the one trying to get them back. So yeah, there is a strategy here. Tariffs can apply pressure, protect key industries, and send a strong political message. But as always, there's a flip side, and if you don't look at the downsides too, you're only getting half the picture. And the real cost of these tariffs, that's what we're unpacking next. Alright, we've talked about how tariffs can be used as a strategy, but now let's look at the other side, because there are also real risks, and if you ignore them, you're missing the full picture. Here's the thing most people miss. Tariffs don't make foreign companies pay. They make importers and consumers in the US pay more. Let's say the US puts a 60% tariff on Chinese electronics. That doesn't mean the Chinese companies cover that cost. It means the American retailer, or you as the buyer, pay more at the checkout. So instead of a $1,000 laptop, now it's $1,600. And that hits everyone, especially middle and lower class families. And we saw that during the last trade war. Studies found that the entire burden that the tariffs created was passed on to US consumers. So even if the intention is to protect the American worker, you might end up hurting the American consumer. And ironically, these are often the same people that Trump is trying to win over. Trade isn't one-sided. If you tax someone's export, they can tax yours right back. This isn't a one-player game. During Trump's first term, countries like China, Canada, or the EU didn't just sit back. They also hit US industries in return. American farmers were among the hardest hit. China put tariffs on soybeans and pork, and suddenly US agriculture exports plummeted. The government had to spend billions in subsidies to keep farmers afloat, so when you escalate tariffs, it's not just about America first, it can also end up being America alone. And in a world where China is building its own trade alliances, isolating yourself might not be the power move it used to be. This is the emotional core of the argument, that tariffs will bring back American manufacturing. But does this actually work? Yes, some jobs have returned, but many haven't. And some industries actually lost jobs after tariffs were introduced. For example, US steel producers were helped, but steel-using companies, like car makers or production firms for example, were hurt by higher costs. Some companies had to lay off workers because the material was just getting too expensive. So it's not always clear-cut. You might save one industry, but damage 5 in return. The idea of bringing jobs back home is powerful, but in a world of automation and global supply chains, it's just not that simple. Tariffs can shift pain around, but they don't always solve the core issue, how to stay competitive in a high-skill, high-wage economy. So we've got a tool that can pressure trade partners, protect industries, and also win political points, but also raise prices, provoke retaliation, and potentially backfire. So the question is there a better way, or is Trump just playing the game better than everyone else? We've looked at the big moves, the bold strategies, and the backlash. But now let's bring it down to the ground level. Because whether you follow politics or not, Trump's tariff plans could absolutely affect you, whether you're in the US or not. Let's be real, most people don't care about tariffs on Chinese goods. What they do care about is whether their groceries, electronics, or next iPhone is suddenly 20% more expensive. Even if you don't shop for imported goods directly, you're still in the chain. Most products, be it your car or your toothbrush, rely on imported parts, materials, or even just the packaging. So if you're budgeting carefully or already feeling inflation, tariffs could quietly make life even more expensive without you even understanding why. This is one of the most unpredictable parts. If you work in a sector like domestic steel, mining, or certain types of tech, tariffs might bring back contracts, boost profits, or even lead to new jobs. But if you're in a field that depends on imported goods, global clients, or complex supply chains, like automotive, logistics, or agriculture for example, the tariffs could create friction or even layoffs. So even if the idea is America first, it doesn't always mean your job first, because that depends on where you sit in the economy. So here's a deeper takeaway. Trump's tariff plan isn't just about economics, it's a campaign blueprint. He's betting that Americans are tired of globalization, that they want economic walls, not bridges. Whether you agree or not, it means that the next election will be fought over economic identity, not just numbers. So even if you're not an economy nerd, it helps to understand the terms being thrown around. Because when tariffs show up in debates, interviews, and memes, you know what's at stake. If there's one thing that both sides of this debate agree on, it's that the status quo isn't working for everyone. We're at a point where globalization has clearly brought cheap goods and lifted millions out of poverty, but it's also created fragile supply chains, lost jobs, and rising inequality. So maybe tariffs aren't the solution, but they are a symptom of a deeper desire for control over jobs, over prices, over national identity. And whether you like Trump or not, that feeling isn't going away anytime soon. So what can you actually do with this information? Let's zoom out and ask, what's the real big picture here? Trump's proposed tariffs aren't just a trade policy. There's a message behind it. We want control back. Control over where things are made, who we trade with, and what our economy stands for. And yes, tariffs can protect industries. They can make countries think twice before taking advantage of open markets, but they're also blunt instruments. They come with side effects, price hikes, retaliation, and sometimes unintended job losses. They don't automatically rebuild factories, they don't teach new skills, and they also don't fix inequality. So here's the real takeaway. Whether tariffs go up or not, whether it's Trump or Biden or someone else in charge, how you prepare will always matter more than what policies get passed. Understand where your money flows, know how global events ripple into your industry, and stay adaptable, not just reactive. And if you can do that, you're already ahead of like 95% of people that just scroll headlines and panic. So I've traveled all over the world and studied business administration, and I can tell you that every country just tries to protect its own economy. Even if an idea or a decision is for global good, governments are primarily responsible for their own country and its people. So the question isn't just whether tariffs are good or bad. The question basically is whether you're ready to play the game smarter than the system around you. So we've learned that Trump's tariffs are a risky and bold campaign move, which is meant to protect and pressure. They could help domestic industries, but might backfire on consumers and workers. Your wallet, your job, and your vote could all be affected. And most importantly, this is a negotiation tool and part of a bigger battle about how we define economic strength in the 21st century. So thanks for watching. If this video helped you see things differently, give it a like or share it with someone that needs to hear the full story. Until next time, stay sharp.